So yeah,
Cool.
I'm joined today by. Do you just? I was calling you Cog in like the run up to the stream. Is that just
Yeah,
what you would? Is that usually what you go by as like your internet moniker?
yeah, Cog, AntifaCog, something like that. Yeah,
No
um,
worries.
yeah, that's usually what I use. People call me Cog. It was Kevin Logan. Do you know Kevin Logan?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he started calling me Cog first of all, as my sort of moniker when I used to do like podcasts and shows with him and Mike Stuckbury, and it
Fine, yeah.
became a running
That's
thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sweet, sweet. Yeah, no. So we're on coming on to talk about local elections, all of the news of the past week. We've got Beergate. There's some very weird Twitter drama to go through as well. Um, but we'll start with the more kind of serious stuff first. I
oh
guess.
yeah,
Anyway, do you want to like obviously I think we actually first came across each other probably in Chud Logic's chat, but not realizing, and
yes,
then we
yeah, sort of.
actually it's kind of we didn't realize that's who we were at the time. Ooh. Hey, thank
Yes.
you for the follow, Scrubby, much appreciated. But yeah, what was I gonna say? But we actually first became friends on TikTok when we actually cross pollinated through there. So you don't introduce yourself to the
Yes.
chat and just let everyone knows what your politics, what you do, your platforms. Shill yourself. Go ahead.
Oh god, I'm terrible at shilling myself. Okay, so I have quite a large platform on TikTok. That's the main platform that I use. I typically create sort of what I consider like anti-fascist content, whether that's opposing the current conservatism, which is moving ever further to the right, or whether it's picking up on a specific issue, for example, like LGBTQ rights, women's rights. I mean, I tend to do a lot of gender stuff. I guess that's how our FYPs ended up crossing. Our For You pages end up crossing quite a bit. But also commenting on British and American politics. Um, yeah, I think that's basically what I do mostly on TikTok. I have tried to move my audience over, but it's so difficult to build up an audience on other platforms. I'm on Twitch under the same name, AntifaCog, but I very rarely stream on Twitch because I can get 200 odd viewers on TikTok, and then I come over to Twitch and I'm very rarely talking to anyone. It does take a lot of time to build up on Twitch, and having that audience, it kind of hasn't made sense for me so far to make that leap across. Um,
Yeah,
but sorry, I'm getting into boring stuff now.
that's fine. I mean, that's what we were just talking about before you kind of came onto the stream, like the ability to cross pollinate people from platform to platform. I mean, I messaged TikTok and Streamlabs and be like, "Can you get my live approved on TikTok?" I have like 1,200 followers
Yeah,
now, and I'm an absolute reprobate who pays for Streamlabs Prime. So I multi-stream to Twitch and YouTube and Facebook. So then to be able to add TikTok on top of that, and then we'll at least be able to use because my platform with the biggest followers is also TikTok, despite the fact it's
yeah,
just cut up pieces of my stream and other people's content that I've hijacked that, whatever, the people much bigger than I am material doesn't make much difference, right? Um, that I would like to be able to actually make my streams go onto TikTok because you can take your stream key and it's one of the native thing that's natives a platform that's on Streamlabs or Streamlabs OBS at the very least. So then I'd like to be able to use that to be able to get people watching my live content too, because at least they'll be able to chat
yeah.
in with everybody as well.
This is the thing that I'm finding with TikTok, because they haven't given me a live stream key either, and I've been like, I could do so much better on the with like the proper setup and everything. But instead I use a phone which is like mounted on a stand here that I just keep there permanently now.
That's
To
fair.
do the lives and stuff. Like, it really doesn't make a lot of sense given that you know, you could stream with decent audio. But yeah, for some reason they haven't. I know smaller accounts that have been given stream access. It seems to have been done on a really arbitrary basis, and I'm not sure how they've done it because I've asked them a couple of times, like you, for a stream key. Did you fill out that Google Doc form?
Yes,
Was
yeah,
that
yeah,
the
yeah.
one you're thinking
The
of? The
one
same
from
one?
the
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And they've just been rubbish at replying and responding. Um, but yeah, I again, this is like proper like um streaming, um like the semantics of streaming, if you like,
Yeah, for
to
sure, for
us.
sure,
Yeah.
for sure. Because I mean, I was speaking to somebody before about this today as well. In the actual Twitch platform, like a lot of integrated stuff, like the monetization and the way in which subscriptions work is really good. But the actual user interface for watching a stream is garbage. It's horrendous. It's really bad. And YouTube is way better, but obviously there's no inherent monetization tools available on YouTube. Um,
Mm.
so, I guess that's why I dual stream, because then it means that I can pull audiences from both places. I mean, if one of them decides to take off, then maybe I'll just stick to one platform. But whilst we've got it at the moment, I might as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, with that in mind, local election results. Any initial takes that you've got? Obviously, I mean, the big headlines were huge drop in Tory seats across basically every part of the country. Huge gains for the Lib Dems across lots of parts of the country. So big pockets of Green surges as well, and Labour not really doing as well as the high Westminster polling would show, not doing as well, especially outside of London, and losing seats and huge many places outside of London. SNP gaining seats, gained more seats than Labour did in Scotland. And there is now zero. There are actually zero Conservative controlled councils anywhere in the UK outside of England as well. So I actually put it. I put it out on Twitter. I think it was probably the best night that like us leftoids probably could have hoped for. In that Starmer did disappointingly, the Tories did fucking abysmally, the Greens did pretty well, and Drakeford did well in Wales, right? So
Yeah.
especially considering the way in which the results were different in the north of England and in London, it kind of shows the point that we were making about who Starmer is appealing to or trying to appeal to and failing. Right? What's your take?
Yeah, like I think it's been majorly mixed results for the main two parties because I do think that the Tories have had like a bad loss, but you've got to put that in the context of them having been in power for like 13 years and in the midst of 6 months of pretty consecutive scandals, just being hit by scandal after scandal after scandal. Um, like in a way, I mean, we're in like one of their MPs was caught watch like a front bench MP was caught watching porn the other day in the House of they've just been hit by the worst things from Westminster, and I think that's the context in which Douglas Ross, the Scottish leader, made a real mistake in like he put in a vote letter of no confidence in Boris Johnson and then
Yeah, outwardly
withdrew that
too.
letter.
He made a big point of doing it when he originally did so too.
Yeah, yeah, and then he withdrew that letter. And some Scottish Tories are blaming his ties to Westminster now. He's kind of screwed it from both ends because the Tories who were kind of loyal to Boris Johnson see him as a traitor, and the people who don't like Boris Johnson in Scotland see him as complicit with Boris Johnson's Partygate stuff. So he's messed up. But that's kind of getting hyper specific. But yeah, it's a big win for the Lib Dems, the SNP and the Greens. The SNP increased their overall vote share as well in Scotland. They actually increased their vote share, which is incredible considering how long they've been in it. And the Scottish Greens
Yeah,
made historic gains in Scotland for their party as well.
the good
I think it's
Greens,
worth noting.
basically.
Yeah, yeah. It's worth noting. These are all progressive parties, all winning in Scotland particularly, um, and making historic gains under a single transferable vote system, where they've actually got a system in place where you have proportional representation. It really does show that the progressive parties would benefit from electoral reform. And not to echo Femi too much, but I think Femi is exactly right in that an electoral reform pact would probably benefit all of the left wing parties, including the SNP, and it would be worthwhile for Labour to join such a pact. But Labour benefits from first past the post, so it's
What
difficult to get them on side.
What's interesting is that I actually think that the SNP don't benefit from electoral reform. I think they benefit from first past the post because they're a specifically regional party. It's like Le Bloc Québécois over in Canada, who they explicitly rely on first past the post to have such a stranglehold on Quebec politics. But what's interesting is that they have consistently had proportional representation in their manifesto at every election, the SNP,
Mm.
despite it being, I think, a net negative for them. Obviously, I think you'd probably had to do some kind of regional, on like a Westminster level, have like regional proportional representation, or have. I mean, I again as a proper like diehard socialist, I feel like engaging in too much electoral reform, giving too much credence to people like the Lib Dems who are just basically centrist at this point. I mean, I'm not sure what Ed Davey's platform is going to be like. 'Cause he's been keeping his cards pretty close to the chest, right? He's like unlike Joe Swinson, who was just explicitly just like neoliberal incarnate. Fucking despise her. Um, it feels like to be able to properly get systemic change from a socialist perspective, you need to have some electoral method that's able to benefit a large socialist movement, right? Without it being stopped by some kind of moderate, some kind of moderate roadblock in Westminster. So I think that if we should change to a proportional representation system on a Westminster level, I would say TPP would probably the way I would go, like they have in Australia, because then then people still get their votes represented for smaller parties, but it
Mm.
overall still allows there to be the ability for large parties to gain majorities as well. But I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I definitely am not set on single transferable vote as the alternative system. Like I could be persuaded other ways. But I
Yeah,
do think the first past the post like needs to
yeah, definitely has
go.
to go. Yeah,
Um, no, with Ed Davey and Layla Moran, um, I think that I bring up Layla Moran because, of course, she came within a hair's breadth of getting the leadership instead of Ed Davey, so she's got quite a lot of influence within the Lib Dems. Um, surprisingly, like, I'm not sure if it's because Keir Starmer's Labour's moved to the right, but effectively the Lib Dems and the Greens. I mean, the Greens have always been to the left of the Labour Party in most cases, but the Lib Dems particularly seem to be to the left of the Labour Party these days.
I mean,
Um,
at the point at which you're getting like the Labour Party running attack adverts that are explicitly criticizing progressive policy platforms of the Lib Dems, you're just like, what bizarre
yes.
world have I lived in? It's like being in 2002 and 2003 when Charles Kennedy was just taking the left wing, the kind of nominally left wing opposition to like Blair and the Iraq War. I don't, it's frustrating with the way Blairism has impacted a party policy in this country, but I digress. Yeah, with regards to like the Lib Dems and electoral votes, clearly they've seen huge gains across the country, and I think a lot of the time in blue seats as well. Like
Mm,
we were chatting in a thread previously about what we think that these results mean for any kind of general election moving forward. I think someone in your replies was saying that they think that they're sure it would mean that we're gonna with a Tory majority in the next election, and I think that we're seeing such a political realignment because of essentially how the Tories feel like they had like a base, they had like a supporter base who would carry them through every election, which the demographics say that it should, but they screwed the pooch so bad by having just a cabinet full of the most fucking stupid people imaginable. I think they're going to
mm.
continue losing support to the Lib Dems, especially in like the southwest, and like some places like Hertfordshire and places like that. Um, so I think that we're going to be looking at hung parliaments for a very long time. But it's clear the Lib Dems have. 'Cause it's difficult because on national issues, Lib Dems are pretty good. On local issues, they're pretty bad. I remember how there was the by-election in was it Cheshire and Amersham, and the Lib Dems were explicitly criticising the Tories for their proposed planning proposal reforms, which would allow it easier for new builds to be able to erect in certain areas and to be able to gain planning permission. So that's essentially attacking. That's essentially Lib Dems courting the NIMBY vote. So you have to be super fucking wary about what they might do in
Mm.
like a party political scenario and what their manifesto might include. Um, and Alex was making a point in chat before about the Lib Dems as well. Um, the possibility that they will also, theoretically might sell out to the Tories again in a future general election if they're the people who are vying for blue yellow marginals. That would lead them to be more likely to want to create some kind of electoral alliance with the Tories, even though it went so disastrously for them last time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never rule it out, but apparently Ed Davies' position is that he's not. not even going to consider because of how badly it went
Okay,
for Nick Clegg.
that's relief.
Apparently, that's Ed Davies' position, and the Lib Dems I'm speaking to seem to back that position. But the Labourites I would have been speaking to at the beginning of 2020 would have been said, yeah, we would have been saying we don't want to move away from a Corbynite party platform, and that didn't go particularly well. Like I think that there's always the possibility, but they're still recovering from the Clegg era. Like that's still something they're recovering from, and it was like 13 years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
it was.
yeah.
It was my first. It was my first vote in a general election, and my god, I'm still embarrassed about it. So I lived in a red blue swing seat. I was in Fleetwood and Lancaster at the time, which is red
Mm.
blue swing seat, and I just fucking me and a load of other Lancastrian students at the time just fucking incinerated our votes for the Dems. Fucking idiot. And there was a guy who I lived with in halls, a guy called Joe. If you're watching, Joe, I don't know why you would be, but I'm sincerely apologise for the convincing you tried me to do to get me to vote Labour, and I just didn't, like a fucking clown.
Oh, poor Joe. I mean, Joe did the right thing. At the very
Yeah,
least, there was
sure.
one vote going there. Like, yeah, no, I wasn't old enough to vote in that election, but I don't know which one. I probably would have been tricked by the Lib Dems, to be fair. Like, what they were saying was good at that election. And I do always say, like, you're never too smart to fall for propaganda. Do you know what I mean? There's
True,
never a
true. No
point.
one is immune to propaganda.
Yeah,
Again, it's incredibly frustrating having this conversation with the liberals who just they think that everyone has this kind of inalienable like personal agency that they always kind of go by. It's actually kind of very libertarian thing. It's a very kind of praxeology kind of based
yes,
viewpoint, which I fucking despise, obviously, because we're all subject to our material conditions and also propaganda. And they just think,
yeah,
well, if you tell people that they're being propagandized to, they say, well, why are you denying my agency? And I'm like, well, no, none of us have the agency that we think we do, right?
yeah, yeah. There's no level of intelligence that can allow you to be to move your way past A, being lied to, and B, can give you like infinite knowledge to avoid falling for any propaganda. Like, um, and this is how I sort of make my defense of like, because as you know, I've been quite loud about it. I voted for Keir Starmer at the beginning of 2019, at the beginning of 2020, to yeah, to become leader of the Labour Party. Against the advice, I should say, of several of my socialist friends. Lots of my socialist friends disagreed with me on that. But
The
the
platform
stance
was
he was
good.
putting forward at that point was like Corbynism without Corbyn. You know, like, and I was like, you know what? If Corbynism in a suit is what it takes to win some people over from the centre, fine. That's fine. What we got, not
It's
fucking,
nothing. It's all,
not even close.
but
Yeah,
the crazy thing is that we keep being called like cranks, or I saw someone on TikTok call me a fucking ultra for being a Corbyn supporter. And I'm like, come on, like I'm
yeah,
like an ultra suck them at that point, right? Come on, come the fuck on.
yes,
And then, but literally, we spent ages. The Labour left has spent a huge amount of time compromising, and we're happy with compromise candidates. And a lot of people on the Labour left were happy with Starmer as a compromise candidate as well. And now he's
yeah,
lurched hugely far to the right, abandoned basically all of his pledges, and trying to tell us that we need to compromise even further. And he won't even give us a
yeah,
fucking cent of what you actually proposed to us on his leadership election platform. It's fucking disgraceful, absolutely
yeah.
disgraceful.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, you can get away with treating left wing people of the Corbynite wing the way that you would never get away with treating anyone else on the political spectrum. Never. Like, you can get away with purges, you can get away with silencing them, you can get away with, gerrymandering elections to stop them getting into power. Like, you can actually do it. Like, and Keir Starmer's done all this. You can get away with lying to them, breaking all of your promises to them, and it's just not newsworthy. Like, and Keir Starmer's done all of this. It's just absolutely extraordinary. Never mind the general marginalisation from politics as a whole. Like, chat shows like. I mean, it's true of the broader left, like the broader proper left wing left, like the Green Party very rarely gets a seat on Question Time, despite making up a significant percentage of the overall votes that the country have cast at this election and previous elections. Um, it's but panel shows like that kind of don't bring the Greens on. They don't bring left wing
But Nigel
points of view
Farage,
on.
he goes in every other fucking week.
Exactly. This is
Okay,
exactly it.
he get into a huge rant about the BBC, but it's probably a topic for another time. But I think it's important when you look at things like the Green gains that are happening now, the potential challenge seats, especially like place like Bristol West moving forward. I think it's really important to be able to, I guess, from an electoral standpoint, if we are fully committed to like a left wing platform, then even though I kind of said for a very long time that I would continue voting for Labour Party as long as they still had the affiliation with the unions, because I don't want my money. Why am I spending money on a union that's going to then contribute to a party that I'm then not going to vote for and not put my interests at heart of? But the French election has kind of changed my viewpoint in the, and also when you look at back at 2017 and 2019, the way in which the Green, the kind of the eco vote, kind of coalesced around general left wing politicians. Regardless, a lot of Green supporters previously would vote for people like Corbyn, and you saw the way in which the Green candidate, despite climate change being a huge issue at the French election, huge amounts of the Green vote coalesced around Mélenchon, and so much so that even a centre left party like ELV is now in a coalition with Mélenchon in the French Parliament, right? So clearly, as long as because the best, as far as I'm concerned, in 2017 and 2019, the best manifesto for Green politics was the fucking Labour Party, and without beating the
Mm.
Greens at their own game, and that now that we're not doing the same thing, it's clear that we need to be able to threaten Labour with losing seats to the Greens to be
Yeah.
able to push their platform to a place where we're actually going to get proper like climate change policy. Because at the moment, we're getting nothing. We're just not getting it. I mean, neither of them, like with the way in which Starmer's moved towards an explicitly neoliberal platform, we both know, you and I both know, that cannot solve the climate crisis just due to the nature of the platform. It doesn't matter what things he'll say he'll do, unless there's fundamental change from a systemic level. That's not going to create the conditions with which that we can create, we can
Mm.
change the future on climate change. And when we were talking about the way in which policy platforms are affecting elections, this brings me nicely on to, because we've spoken about Scotland already, moving on to Wales, where there is now only Labour and Plaid Cymru councils. There's no Tories there anymore. Labour increased their vote share even more than it had previously. They now are, and obviously there was the Senate elections in 2021 as well, which Labour now have complete control over. Under Mark Drakeford, someone who supported Jeremy Corbyn, putting
Yeah.
forward positive proposals, positive policy that genuinely affects people's lives, and there's no debate. There's no debate about how Wales votes nowadays, both in last year's elections and this year's elections, and also at the general election in 2019 as well. Apart from in some places up in the north of Wales, right? So clearly, when you look at how successful Labour were in Wales as opposed to England, we can see what things people are looking for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We can see what people are looking for. The Tories lost a third of their seats in Wales in total, like and large parts of that was to Mark Drakeford's left-wing Labour Party. And he's always, even under Jeremy Corbyn, he tried to separate himself from Westminster. Like that's always been Mark Drakeford's thing.
Mm.
And and it seems to have benefited him quite well in comparison to I don't really get how Keir Starmer's going to claim credit for that, because Keir Starmer and Mark Drakeford's politics clearly don't line up. Um, yeah, and he's seen huge successes in Wales. I did want to kind of on Keir Starmer. I see, even if Keir Starmer, I agree with you, the systemic problems, no matter what Keir Starmer promises, the systemic problems with him moving towards a more neoliberal platform will make addressing the climate crisis harder. But at the same time, there's a more fundamental problem with Keir Starmer making any promises to me now, in that I voted for him to make these 10 pledges. He has broken, at least in whole or in part, all of these promises. And he said he will break his promises again. I was just amazed that Keir Starmer came out and said, in broad daylight, came out and said, "Yeah, I'll break my promises to get elected." What politician does
It's,
that?
like-
Like,
it's
if Donald
crazy.
Trump did that, you'd go, "What? You just admitted that you're willing to lie to people, and people are still going to vote for you?
Espe-
What?"
Especially given the months and months and months and months of him telling the whole electorate we can't trust Boris Johnson. He's a liar. He lied about this. He lied about Partygate. He lied about all of these things to do with COVID. He lied about Matt Hancock, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. He's a habitual liar, which obviously he is. And then to come
Yeah.
back to us and said, "Yeah, I lied about the pledges, and I'll do it again." I was like, "What is this? What is this nonsense?"
Yeah, I genuinely don't know how he thinks he can get away with a platform like that. Which leaves, because you can't trust a word that guy says, because he is a fundamentally dishonest politician, it leaves you with the one option of the one reason that you could possibly like vote for him being, I'm not Boris Johnson. I'm not the Conservatives. Vote for me because otherwise you'll get the Conservatives. I've said, I'm sure you've heard me say this before, but that is exactly the same tact that Hillary Clinton took towards Bernie supporters in 2016. It was, fuck you, I don't need to. Sorry, am I allowed to swear on your?
Yeah, you
Sorry.
fucking go ahead,
Okay,
mate.
cool. It was basically, fuck you. I don't care about. I don't need your votes. You'll vote for me because the alternative is much worse. And Joe Biden criticized Hillary Clinton, interestingly, in the run up to the 2020 election for that specific thing. And he started to create what were known as the Unity Task Forces, which saw people like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and John Kerry come together in little councils to discuss what would be acceptable to both the right and the left of the party, the Democratic Party, in order to get them past that line of the 2020 election.
Well,
It
AOC
has
was
to come from the
consulted
leadership.
by the Biden administration, by Biden's platform, to create the green section of their manifesto, right? She was one
Yeah,
of the main people who was drafted in to be able to do that. And
yeah.
then it's crazy how the Democrats seem to be doing better at actually creating some kind of unity platform,
Hmm.
despite them essentially being an entirely corporately controlled party.
Yeah.
And how is Joe Biden a more pro-union party leader than Keith fucking Starmer? What fucking bizarro world are we living in?
I know. It makes no sense. But like, it's really hard to put this across to people because people don't want to. People want people who have been cheated and lied to and marginalized within our politics to just fall in line and vote for Keir Starmer. And that's not good. That's not a way to win over your political opponents. If you've cheated and lied to them and refused to reach out to them, you're gonna get them turning around and saying, no, I'm gonna go vote. I'm gonna vote for the Greens. I'm gonna vote for the Lib Dems. I did it. I actually, because of my local area, I'm not usually a Lib Dem supporter, obviously. Like I'm a yeah, I'm a socialist, so I'm obviously
Yeah.
not with the Lib Dems on many issues. But my local councillor, it's between my local councillor and a Tory, and my local councillor is very good with refugee issues. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean,
well
again,
known.
tactical voting. Anyway, we are hamstrung by our electoral system, so
Yes, yeah, and so
we can't
like
really
by the
fail.
way, I probably would have done differently in a STV or another
Yeah, yeah,
alternative
exactly.
voting system. Like, um, yeah, but I think London's quite an interesting one to look at because this time yesterday, London looked like it was going to go. It was going to be a great victory ground for Labour.
And then they
And
lost Tower
actually,
Hamlets and Croydon.
yeah, yeah, and it's just been neutral. They lost three, gained three, as far as I
Yep,
can tell.
yep.
And
Well, one
it was
left to declare, right?
yeah, and they left. It was mostly down, as far as I can tell, to the Greens, to the fact that they lost votes to the Greens. And Keir Starmer's still not getting it. He's still not understanding. Yeah. uh,
Well, I mean,
I
it's crazy, like how he's just kind of filled himself with like a cabinet full of yes men, rather than actually looking at some way of being able to create a platform for the people want to vote for. So much so that even though Rishi Sunak's polling has tanked by like 50 points or something crazy, going from like a 30% approval rating to like minus 20% approval rating, he's still better approved than Rachel Reeves because she's just such a non-entity. No one likes her. She's a charisma vacuum, and literally the only thing she said about the energy bills crisis, we're going to do a windfall tax. That's it. That's all she's done. Like,
Yeah.
and she's a complete nobody with no platform, no hope. Who
Yeah.
just happens to be the only person who will happily endorse the right-wing platform that someone wants to be able to put across, right?
Yeah.
On his front
Yeah.
bench, and people still fucking hate her.
Well, and rightly so. Like, Rachel Reeves, like she said just the other day, she was like, her statement came basically to, "Oh, I'm glad Labour lost in
Yeah,
2019," and like
yeah.
that's pretty much what she was saying. It wasn't her exact words, to be fair to her, but like that's the essence of what she was saying there. And you've also got to look at where these people are targeting. They're targeting places like Sunderland. They are targeting kind of the north, the Midlands, and they're trying to win over the sort of Brexit vote from those places, the places that Jeremy Corbyn didn't get, the red wall, as far as the red wall is a thing. And it's just like the Lib Dems were gaining in Sunderland, um, who were everything that those Brexit voters should have been against. It makes so little sense. You just think that their electoral strategy is completely screwed.
It doesn't make any fucking sense, does it? And what's interesting is that I spent like the entirety of 2017 till now. I guess actually, to be fair, more like 2019, 2018, 2019, 2020, trying to fight against this idea of the liberal metropolitan elite, right? That everyone said were Corbyn's voter base, even though it just wasn't, especially not up north, right? Especially how good he did in northern seats in 2017, right?
Mm.
Because it's not a real thing that kind of I mean, there's the middle class, like liberally minded people who just hate the Tories and just are Labour supporters essentially just because they're the main opposition. They don't have any policy prescriptions that they care about or any kind of actual political ideology. They're just like Tories bad, Labour opposition. I'm going to support Labour. That's the thing. And they're usually reasonably well off, and they're usually pretty liberally minded. And these are the only kind of people you'd think of as being like the metropolitan liberal elite, right? Even though that the actual category metropolitan liberal elite doesn't really exist because people actually use it to mean basically just progressive minded millennials who have had to move to cities because of the demographic shift with the loss of manufacturing in suburban areas and the high level of university education in the Blair years has moved all these peoples from suburbs into cities, and because they live in
Mm.
cities they become more progressive, they become anti-racist, they become basically you and me, I guess. I'm not sure what your background is. I grew up in the suburbs. I moved to Lancaster University and then moved to Manchester into an inner city because that's where you go to get a job because there's no jobs anywhere else, especially not
Yeah.
for people especially for people who haven't grown up into a vocation like you used to in the 70s, 80s or whatever,
Mm.
right? So there's kind of concentrated a lot of the kind of youth vote in cities, and because they are pretty like progressive minded, they kind of clash with the old kind of boomer aesthetic, right? So that's kind of
Yeah.
what people mean when they say metropolitan liberal elite, even though we're all earning 20k a year, all spending £500 a month in rent or whatever. I'm not now,
Yes.
obviously, because I've got a mortgage for this place, but the vast majority of people, especially younger than I am, I'm 30 now, especially people younger
Yeah.
than I am, who grew up outside those things, people don't understand. I guess the idea of class is so warped in the UK that you can be someone who earns 20k who pays £500 a month in rent in an inner city, and people will think of you as an elite, and that doesn't make sense. But I digress. Now we're looking at the results of this election when Keir Starmer, all he is Tories bad, doesn't have any platforms to be able to help the actual poor, the actual working class, the precariat, right? And then you see
Yeah.
big gains in places like Wandsworth and places like that in like central London, where it probably is the actual metropolitan liberal elite from like an actual materialist perspective, and losing seats and
Yeah.
losing support in the northern places, which he was supposed to be pandering to with the whole flag shagging business, right? It's almost like the people in the north aren't just a bunch of mindless racists, like some people seem to think they are. It's almost like they're actual people who have lives and who have fears and who have difficulties they're going through for the cost of living crisis, who need actual proper like material benefits in their lives, the walking around with a flag and talking about how many more cops you're gonna have and how bad the Lib Dems are for decriminalizing drugs or whatever, then that's not something that appeals to them. Like,
Yeah, it's not going to address like but it does prove, and like what you were talking about with like you and me as like being classed as the metropolitan liberal elite sort of thing. It does prove that we're a product of our socio-economic conditions in the exact same way. You know what I mean? Like you and I, we're part of that liberal the liberal university. I hate using that word. Obviously, we're socialists, we're not liberals, but like
well,
the people
liberal
who
liberal in a like a social sense, right? We're progressive
yeah
minded when it comes to social issues. Obviously,
yes
from our actual economic perspective, neither of us are liberals.
uh,
But
yeah
it's a pretty muddy term at this point. But
exactly.
go ahead.
It's worse when you use it in international relations. Like that. That's when it gets really confusing.
Yeah,
But the moving into cities, and people in the north who face, let's not forget, more deprivation than the rest of the UK, because other parts of the UK devolved powers have insulated their councils, and then the sort of left wing as a whole voting north has been hit hardest by Tory cuts over the past 13 years because they voted for left wing parties, and then the Conservatives would strip their funding. Something that they never tell you about the rates of council tax that people pay under Labour. But I think that under Labour, it's still 300 and odd pounds cheaper on average than it is under the Conservatives. Worth mentioning. Um,
despite all of the differences in funding from Westminster. It's interesting
exactly.
how like there was this big I forget the actual story. It was quite a while back now, but essentially there was this big leveling up fund that had been earmarked by the Tories, and they just gave it to a bunch of Tory safe seats. It doesn't make any sense electorally, but there you go.
Yeah, yeah. You're better off. You're always better off voting for a left wing party. Um, yeah, and it's like fairly inescapable. That fact. I don't know to what extent the collapse of the Tories, like 401 seats lost or something like that overall, or is it close to
Yeah,
500 now? I can't remember.
let me check. I did have it up. Close off Kate Montgomery. In England, they're down 338. Scotland down 63. Um, Wales down 86. So it's coming up to 500 now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's coming up to 500. Sorry, some of my figures are a bit old because I was reading through articles from. Yes, it's unfortunate that it's Sunday today because it means that not all of
Slow news day.
the
Yeah.
regular news stations are pumping out information, which yeah, it doesn't help things. But I know that the top of the Tory party are considering Boris Johnson's position, but they've been considering
As you
Boris
would.
Johnson's position for some time. Yeah, Nazim Zahawi came out to defend Boris Johnson, but he's one of very few that is willing to stick their neck out for Boris Johnson at the moment. And a
Well,
lot of the sort of
it seems he's doing the same thing that Starmer's doing in just surrounding himself with yes men and like a tight
mm,
circle. But everyone up the like, I guess obviously in Labour, people aren't talking as much smack obviously about Starmer as as you or I would. But it seems
mm,
like the Tory party is just it's their internal politics have always been kind of fascinating, especially in like a post Brexit world, right? But people like Raab and Patel and Shaps and Zahawi have all because they're part of the inner ring. They're part of the Save Big Dog sphere. Their kind of careers are tied to Boris Johnson now. They've been tarred
yeah,
with the brush unless they kind of form like the Johnson Testudo. They what's going to happen to their political careers afterwards, right? So there's
mm,
so few Tories out there outside of the inner ring who are willing to defend him or willing to stick their neck on the line.
yeah. Um, Rishi Sunak's an interesting one of those because Rishi Sunak is taking a bit of the brunt of this because the Conservatives want him to lower or to cut taxes basically to help with the cost of living crisis. But he's caught because Boris Johnson's got a much more He wants a sort of a higher tax economy, and yeah, his career being tied to Boris Johnson is a problem. Boris Johnson is also considering a cabinet reshuffle, which is quite interesting because I mean I never underestimate how many um, uh, how much crap you can scrape out of the Tory barrel. But I'd be surprised if there were that many um, willing to take up new cabinet positions. It would probably be a reshuffle, literally in the sense of moving around the same people to different
Yeah.
positions to see if that helped things. Yeah, his options are limited. Speaking of honesty, should we have a talk about Beergate?
Um, I was going to talk whilst we're on the subject of local elections. I was
Okay.
finishing off because we've not spoken about Northern Ireland yet. Because as
Oh,
Sabercat in the chat was pointing out, that's one of the other really interesting parts of what's happened in these local elections,
mm,
which is heavily obviously another thing that's heavily impacted by Brexit. Which is interesting that you obviously I posted a thread on Twitter the other day about all the things that Corbyn's been proved right on. And he was one of the main ones who was criticising the Northern Ireland Protocol at the time, at the time between the elections and around the election time, especially during the transition from May to Boris Johnson. He was the first one to criticise the Northern Ireland Protocol, and then wouldn't you know, the Northern Ireland Protocol is garbage. The elections have now happened. Sinn Féin are now the biggest party in Northern Ireland with regards to how many seats they've got in Stormont, right? And turns out they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and reconsider the Northern Ireland Protocol over again. Wouldn't you fucking know it? Every single time it's just always right. It's just always right.
yes. I'd say on the Northern Ireland Protocol, I've deeply enjoyed watching the DUP very loudly make a show of themselves, everybody looking, and then the DUP just since 2017 just loudly shit its pants for the last like couple of years. Just like unfortunately, they've just gone from bad to worse very publicly.
Yeah.
Just destroyed their entire political game, just destroyed it.
Did
And
ALP win like nine extra seats in Stormont, right?
yeah, it's like it's not that they're like the DUP have just yeah they've screwed up so badly by backing Theresa May, who didn't last long herself, and like it was pretty obvious Theresa May wasn't going to last very long, even in 2017. Like it was like why what? But propping up Theresa May got them in a situation where they've had to like they've had to defend a position that was completely indefensible because the Northern Ireland Protocol and hard Brexit itself is a contradiction in terms for Northern Ireland because they simultaneously um, they've broken apart the thing that held the Good Friday Agreement in place was always the European Union because the European Union effectively allowed for the Republicans to have a soft border and the Northern Irish to have a hard border. Sorry, the Northern Irish. What do I mean? The Unionists to have a hard border. And so it was always a settled problem. But you have neither. Technically, that is a border. That's a full-on legitimate border, as much as any of the other borders inside of the inside of really the Schengen zone, but like inside of the European Union. And that contradiction held in place by our membership of the European Union. Uh, well, it turns out that the DUP backing Brexit, and particularly a hard Brexit, has now really screwed it over.
Yeah, really screwed the
And
pooch on that one, haven't they?
yeah, they've no choice now but to watch Sinn Féin, who are now the largest party, I think, for the first time ever.
I mean, they were on the
Um,
BBC, right? On the BBC, they were saying that it's unprecedented, and they went mask off for like 3 seconds, where they said, "Well,
yeah,
literally, the system, the way the seats of the gerrymandered, the way the system is set up there is specifically to make sure that a Unionist party always had power in Northern Ireland, and
yeah,
Brexit has fucked that up so badly." And not just Brexit, but the catastrophic handling of Brexit by Theresa May and then also subsequently Boris Johnson, right? Where they've had to try and cede the border checks between the two halves of Ireland, with
Mm.
the essentially the border that they've now got down the Irish Sea instead. They've just fucked everything up so royally that even in a system specifically designed to disenfranchise Republicans, they still are
Yeah.
the largest party. It's
Yeah.
quite wild to me. And Alex is talking about in chat that he's really worried that new violence could break out, and that's
Well, yeah.
I'm as worried as he is at this point. Again, my
Yeah.
knowledge of Republican politics is pretty slim. To be fair, I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but considering that the DUP are looking at digging their heels in to make sure that there's going to be the ways that they're going to be able to stymie the way in which we can make kind of progress on these issues. It's an interesting time to say the least.
Yeah. Uh I what I'm hearing from Ireland at the moment, and I keep saying this on streams because I think it's worth emphasizing. The old lines of unionism and republicanism that used to make up Irish politics to some degree, they were never quite that straightforward, but they've become a lot more blurred than they used to be in the last couple of years. Brexit has made a united Ireland a lot more likely. The danger does come though. There are still real nasty unionist extremists, um, but they make up a very small percentage of the population compared with those who are that agree with want to be part of the United Kingdom, but are also extremely pissed at the DUP and the government of the UK at the moment. Um, with Sinn Féin being the largest party, Michelle O'Neill could become the First Minister of Northern Ireland. Um, but the DUP are looking like they might stomp their feet and refuse, which probably isn't going to be great for their overall reputation inside of Northern Ireland. Um, because above all, like unionists or Republicans, most people in Northern Ireland value peace and the peace since
Mhm.
1997.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know whether this is true nowadays, but there's a lot of kind of youth participation in both Irish and Northern Irish politics, a lot more than we get, especially in England, where youth participation is depressingly low. Um, and obviously these people kind of grew up after the Troubles, right? They grew up after the issues with regards to the IRA. They grew up into the economic crises of a post neoliberal society. So their kind of their viewpoints are kind of excised from that, the especially the religious, um like the religious parts of this discussion, and it's all about some kind of material analysis of policy platforms and what they mean, and it's why we're seeing such a huge swing towards Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland as well, because they're the only people offering an economic platform that speaks to the people who are going through same kind of cost of living crisis that we're getting over here as well, and that people are
Mm.
seeing all around the world. So
Yeah,
they're the kind of the shackles of Sinn Féin being tied to the IRA. Obviously that's going to become less over time as well, but we're just getting the next generation of people coming through who do see Sinn Féin as a positive voice for economic change, and I think obviously that's a good thing. And if it does lead to a reunited Ireland without too much violence, fingers crossed that doesn't happen,
mm.
then you know more power to them.
Yeah. I've always been cautious on the question of uh, whether I would favour a united Ireland. I'm part Irish myself, and I very much favour favour republicanism, a united Ireland. But at the same time, I don't want that to come at the cost of restarting the Troubles. Like that's not what I
Mm.
want. Um, and it's always difficult to hedge your bets and go with the balance there. Um,
I mean, I always
did we?
again, my main thing is just it's all about self determination as far as I'm concerned. Self
Yeah.
determination and the minimization of violence. It just depends, like how much leverage is trying to be exerted by the UK, and especially by Westminster, right? And if they try and
Mm.
start exerting leverage, and especially when we've had to deal with the past kind of 5 years of Tory incompetence about managing Brexit, that could be one of the things that does lead to huge amounts of instability. So definitely a space worth watching. Would you want to move on to Beergate?
Mm. Um, yeah, no, one quick thing.
Hmm.
Scotland. There was one more thing to say about Scotland. Like, despite Anasawa, the Scottish Labour leader, being right to celebrate the fact that Labour had gained from the Tory collapse in Scotland, I think it's worth bearing in mind they were still 12 to 13 percentage points behind the SNP in all of their gains in Scotland, so they're still well behind in Scotland. Um,
Hmm.
and could really do with some focus there. But that's a criticism that I would also make, interestingly, of Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn did not do well in Scotland, um, and there was much to be desired about the well. As far as Jeremy Corbyn was responsible for Scotland, I suppose if Anasar was responsible for Scotland now, then Keir Starmer's responsible for Scotland now. Um, but
I
yeah,
mean, but
it's
to be fair, the huge gains were under Ed Miliband, right? So there was
yeah,
it's interesting. Again, it's so difficult to analyze materially the differences between 2017 and 2019, especially in Scotland, right? When
mm,
you'd have thought that Jeremy Corbyn would have done worse when he was explicitly behind the idea of Brexit, and then the second referendum should theoretically have polled Scottish voters over, but it didn't. It pushed like the Labour vote was way lower in 2019. So it's interesting to think about. But I'm gonna make a bold prediction that I think the next general election, both Labour and the Conservatives are going to win no seats in Scotland. That is my
in
bet.
Scotland. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I don't think they'll
Oh,
win
I'm
any
interested.
seats. I was looking at the swing seats because I only expect the SNP's vote percentage to go up given what we've seen at the council elections. And the only seats that aren't SNP held at the moment, or at least not in 2019, when you look back at their voter history, they're either SNP marginals with Labour and the Tories, or they're Lib Dem marginals. And if we're expecting the SNP to increase their vote share against Labour and the Tories, given what is happening with Starmer and Johnson, and the way in which the Lib Dem vote hasn't collapsed in the way that the Labour and the Tories have in places like Scotland, I think the only way those seats can go is one type of yellow, right? So I genuinely think we'll see
Yeah,
0 seats for both of the two major parties in Scotland at the next election.
interesting. I would put forward what because I was listening to Douglas Ross giving his analysis from Scottish Tory HQ, and his impression was that their voters had just stayed home for the locals, rather than switching, if you see what I mean. So there might be
Yeah,
more damage yet to come from the Scottish Tories. But I think, like me, I felt a lot more comfortable voting against Labour in this election than I would in a general election, because obviously it has such a huge impact comparatively when you vote against a party in a general election. So I think people are happier protest voting in local elections, or avoiding voting as a form of protest in local elections as well. So I don't know, but if you're right, it will be incredibly amusing if Starmer is still at the head of the party and they lose Scotland altogether.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Alex in chat was saying that SNP lost seats, and no, SNP gained seats in the locals. Maybe I just
Mm.
misspoke what I was talking about earlier, but no, they're up 22 councillors and one council.
Yeah.
The SNP.
Yes, they did
Actually,
incredibly well.
they gained more councillors than Labour did, and
Yeah.
also than the Lib Dems too. Um, it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Also interesting to see what happens with SNP at the Greens. Obviously, they have a coalition in Holyrood, don't they? So I'm not sure what's going to happen with the SNP and Scottish Greens in a general election, but we shall see.
Yes. The Scottish Greens are interesting. They are like, even by comparison to the Greens in England, they're a incredibly progressive party, and with some very impressive candidates. My podcast co-host Tumbledryer Meyer was one of the candidates for the Scottish Greens, and she came very close to winning, and did very well. Um, I did want to say about the long Corbyn contradiction.
Oh, it's
You know
true,
about
isn't
this?
it? Yeah. It's
Yes.
funny, isn't it?
Yes, the long Corbyn contradiction in that the reason that we haven't done so well in these elections as we did in 2018, which was like a historic high, where we already held 50% of the seats because we did so well in 2018 under Jeremy Corbyn. But the reason that we did so badly this time round is because of Jeremy Corbyn. You
It's
can't hold both.
it's just completely untenable, isn't it?
Like they want to blame Corbyn for their problems, but at the same time, take say that the reason that their problems are so hard is because Jeremy Corbyn did so well. And it's
It's
like,
crazy, and that's why I was explicitly trying to make that metropolitan liberal elite point before. In the That's why people say, "Oh, well, the people who the genuine Labour supporters are turning away from us because of Corbyn." It's like, well, no. It was in the north that you've lost seats at these council elections, who are the people that you say were lost by Corbyn, but you're doing worse than Corbyn did in those specific seats, whilst doing better in Tory seats in London, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it doesn't make any. It's just cope. They're coping and they're seething because they don't want to admit that they were wrong. They don't want to because they've gone full Stalin mode now. They've excised groups. They've prescribed members from the party. Right. They've expelled Jeremy Corbyn from the whip. Like they've gone scorched earth and they can't go back from it
mm,
now. So they just have to keep like maintaining the charade over and over again.
yeah.
Also, Alex in chat's asking you, where do you stream from when you do stream, and do you have a YouTube channel?
Oh, TikTok. I don't really use YouTube and Twitch, but if you follow me on TikTok, you can join the TikTok lives. That's usually where I do the I get people on and I get them to challenge me to debate. It's a really good exercise, by the way. If you ever get the chance to go on
Parker
and
Sedgwick does it as well. Yeah,
yeah, get sort of yeah. I'm friends with Parker. I like Parker a lot. And I
it's really good.
every now and again I jumped on his stream just a couple of times when he used to do it less regularly to laugh as a conservative, and it was a lot of fun. I
That's
went
quite
on and
funny.
yeah, I made arguments as a conservative. Yeah, it used to be. Obviously, now it's perceived wisdom that if the Labour Party is having problems, it's because of Long Corbyn. It's because of Jeremy Corbyn. That's the sort of perceived wisdom from the liberal kind of media savvy circus. Um, but there was a time when that same media savvy circus used to be extremely concerned, and rightly so, about getting young voters on side. Before 2015, when Jeremy Corbyn took over, there used to be a real um, concern about making sure that young people got out and voted. That young people were honestly the most important people to get out and vote, because that way you were guaranteed to get progressive policy, or not guaranteed to get progressive policies. You were a lot more likely to get the progressive vote out if you appealed to young people. That seems to have been completely forgotten under Keir Starmer. Like it's just it became such a non-concern under Jeremy Corbyn that those voters, I think, have kind of been taken for granted. The idea that you're going to inspire young people with just by the mere act of saying, "Well, I'm not Boris Johnson," totally misunderstands exactly what drove young people to go out and canvass for Jeremy Corbyn.
It's happening in America as well. You've seen that there's been article after article being posted about how the Democrats are going to lose the midterms because they're not engaged, because all of the youth people, all of the youth vote is just not going to come out, and their support has dropped dramatically amongst 18 to 25s or whatever. And I'm just like, well, yeah, because you've given them fucking nothing.
Yeah,
You think, oh, well, they're young people. They have to vote left wings. They're going to have to vote for us. So we don't have to care about trying to actually give them things to vote for. And then, quite rightly, young people are punishing them at the ballot box, as they should do.
yeah.
It's just incredibly frustrating. And then, whereas previously we were all talking about, oh, how do we get young people involved in politics? Or there's this dearth of young people. What are we going to do about young people moving away from politics? And then Corbyn gets involved. It's like, young people support Corbyn. Ugh, can't trust young people. Oh, I can't believe we have to actually think about what young people want. They don't know anything about politics. Where now Keir Starmer's in charge. Oh, now we've got the adults in the room. The adults
Yeah,
who apparently treat politics like fucking football match, where it's just like, I support red team because red team good, rather than thinking about, the material impact of the policy prescriptions being put forward by any of the fucking parties. It's
yeah.
like it's incredibly frustrating. Like, to be
The
honest,
adults
like,
are in charge again.
oh,
Like,
every
that
time
was
I hear
just the
somebody
most.
say that, oh, it's incredibly because these people, everybody, it's like they must be, we need to create, like, I don't know, um like Helena's law or something, where we're going to talk, where anybody who says the adults in the room is the person who has like the most childish prescriptions when it comes to political discourse, because they haven't got a fucking clue what they're talking about. All like, is as far as I'm concerned, the entire group of people who say we're the adults in the room are just the Blairites of of the early 2000s, who just have this one track mind of, to be able to win politics you have to appeal to the centre. There's just this mythical middle class little England or swing voter that we have to appeal to. We have to forget everybody else, and if we just do that like Blair did, we'll be able to win again. As if the material circumstances of what the country and the economy looks like in 2022 are in any way similar to what it was like in 2002. These people are political
Mm.
idiots. They're fucking stupid. They're complete
Yeah.
morons, and they think they know everything, and that's the worst kind of moron, right?
Yeah, I have deeply enjoyed, I've got to say, I have deeply enjoyed all of the 20 points ahead memes. I think my favorite one at the moment is whenever Labour get a unsurprisingly disappointing result, having like pissed off half its support, to use the peep show, that wasn't very
Hey,
Christmassy
20.
mark, but somebody changed it to that wasn't very 20 points ahead. Like just proper like on the nose stuff. Um,
My favourite one
yeah,
is the one from The Simpsons where it's like, I'm coming above the 20 points. When are you getting the 20 points? Is the 20 points there now? Please make with the 20 points.
it's just it's fantastic. There's so much meme, and this is the thing. Like, as much as the politics of this era are horrible, online is a space where people feel like the left feel that they can like breathe out and go, "Hey, let's just have a laugh and a meme about this." It's horrible living through this time, but we have this outlet, and the left finally can I think feels like it can take a step back and go, huh, so how's all that going now you've got rid of us? Yeah, going well for you, is it?
Exactly,
Because
100%.
I always think when I hear Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves speak, I always think of doing the rounds in 2019, in the misery and the rain, particularly of that last day, canvassing it in 2019. Not to go all freaking like Vietnam on you, but like like the like there's just like it was terrible going like knocking around in the rain, working so hard every single day, and doing it. I've got friends who were doing it literally every single day. I wasn't doing it every single day, but I was doing it on and off every single day, um, going round knocking, and talking to people, trying to persuade them to vote Labour, something that everybody should do at some point. Um, but then to get back, and I remember the moment in 2019 when that the poll dropped, the
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 exit
um the
poll.
exit poll, yeah, a Conservative win, and one of my friends turned to me and he like clapped me on the shoulder and he was like, "Right, let's go to the bar. We're finding out what the strongest drink that this place serves is, and you and I are going to drink our problems away." And I don't remember anything after that point that night.
The thing is that, like, we obviously, people put loads of work into trying to get the vote out in those years, and it's incredibly depressing seeing the results come back. But things will happen like that. The way in which these elections, what the cloud these elections hung over, especially with regards to Brexit, is probably the reason why Corbyn got such a good vote in 2017, such a poor vote in 2019. Probably both Brexit related and policy related, but obviously the media hadn't really cottoned on to how badly they could smear Corbyn in 2017, but I
I
digress.
think,
The real
yeah,
worst bit is knowing that we put in so much effort to try and get the vote out in both 2017 and 2019, knowing that Ian McNichol and his band of cunts were trying to sabotage the mission from the
yeah,
inside, right? Knowing there are
yeah,
people within the party trying to make sure that Labour actually didn't win the election. That's the worst bit. And these people
yeah,
now in charge, expecting us to vote for them? Fuck off. No,
yeah.
honestly, just fuck off. And people are like, oh no,
Uh,
you're enabling the Tories. I'm like, tough shit, right? They don't want me to vote for them, and they're gonna make it incredibly difficult for me to give me any even reason to vote for them, considering what they did in 2017 and 2019.
yes.
I'm,
Oh,
hey, thanks for
how
the rage,
many
crowdsource
people?
politics.
Like how many people have been going on at us, going, you're enabling the Tories by even just criticizing Keir Starmer, like not even saying you're not going to vote for him, but just criticizing him, who went out and actively like campaigned against Jeremy Corbyn, like people who actually like. I mean, even like quite high up, people like Mike Gapes are now accusing people who attacked Starmer of being the Trotskyists who are secret agents of the Tories. Like, I
Fucking
just,
gapes.
it's like, and this is Mike Gapes. He left the Labour Party to attack Jeremy Corbyn and gave Boris Johnson his majority in 2019.
And stood
Like,
against Labour in Ilford, and obviously got destroyed, which was hilarious. But
yes, yes. But like just people who people who obviously campaigned against Jeremy Corbyn are now trying to guilt trip people into voting for a Labour Party that lied to them and ran the most dishonest campaign that a Labour leader has ever ran. I just can't. Sorry, I could moan about this for ages. I
we
could I
really
could
could,
go
you
on about
really
this for
could. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Um,
It's just frustrating to know what could have been, but then again, spilt milk and all that.